Welcome. My name is Olave Vassavose, and it is both an honor and a pleasure to be welcoming you, all of you, to the fifth lecture of our 2022-23 program. Before we get on with tonight's inspiring lecturers, first, a quick introduction of the Studium Generale Gent in general, our theme for this year, and I'm going to make you a proposal for the tone and mood of our gathering tonight. Some of you have been to more than one of our gatherings, and you know that I do this at every single lecture, and it takes about 10 to 15 minutes. And you may have heard this many, many times, but please be patient with us. For those of us who don't know this whole thing I'm going to do. Here we go. The Studium Generale Gent is a whole Gent course and a public program that invites its audience, you, to discussions, debates, and critical reflections on society, art, culture, and science. We do so by curating and hosting 10 lectures each year that are centered on one specific theme. Now, through consultations with many of my inspired colleagues at KASK and Conservatorium, our external partners, and some really good friends at the Studium Gent, we chose the following theme: future ecologies. Let me begin to explain this theme, begin with quoting Malcolm Ferdinand, author of the Decolonial Ecology, in which he introduces us to something called the Great Divide. He says, "The Great Divide is the dualistic opposition that separates nature and culture, environment and society, and establishing a vertical scale of values that places man above nature. This is revealed through the technical, scientific, and economic modernizations of mastering nature, whose effects are measured in the extent of the pollution of the earth, the loss of biodiversity, the disruption of the climate, and in the measure of gender inequalities, social misery, and disposable lives engendered." Now, inspired by this decolonial call for the rejection of this separation from man and nature, the Studium Gent seeks to explore this coming year future-orientated ways of thinking, propositions, and even imaginings which presuppose the intertwining of humans with their environment and their non-human neighbors. So humans as part and not as master of ecological systems. To that end, Studium Gent invited thinkers, doers, makers, and researchers to share with you, our audience, their learned and creative visions of the future of the ecological systems that house, enable, threaten, and or change our societies. Our guest speakers tonight are, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Giulia Bellinetti, yeah, okay, and Marente van der Valk. Giulia is the coordinator of the Nature Research Department and leads the Future Materials Lab at the Jan van Eyck Academy. In recent years, Giulia has become increasingly interested in the ecological discourse in relation to contemporary art, institutional work, and interdisciplinary forms of collaborations. Marente van der Valk is a culinary artist and chef. In her work, she has focused on projects and events with an emphasis on environmental awareness, community-mindedness, and the social importance of food, as well as the ephemeral and poetic qualities of food and the act of cooking and eating together. Her work, like you'll see tonight, or probably already experiencing tonight, is often a multi-sensory experience where a love for bringing people together results in a wealth of flavors and colors and a feel-good atmosphere. Is that why you give people beer? To give them a feel-good atmosphere? Good. Good strategy. Currently, Marente coordinates the food lab at the Jan van Eyck Academy. The food lab has been created to offer a multidisciplinary platforms to chefs and artists with an interest in food. That's what you came here for tonight. But before we hear from Giulia and Marente, I want to say a few words about the tone we strive for at all of our Studium lectures. We are cognizant that the topics that we will be addressing this year and tonight as well will and can elicit intense thoughts and feelings. We believe that a collective commitment to the intention of care can help us shape the tone, the nature, and perhaps even the beauty of our gathering this evening. We understand the intention of care to be multidimensional. One, there's the intention to be caring towards our speaker. Two, the intention to be caring towards each other. And three, the intention to be caring towards yourselves. How can we be caring towards a speaker? We think it is important to always keep in mind that our guests are just that, guests. People who have been invited to speak and share their ideas, research, and their ambitions for perhaps a better future. We ask you to help us extend the warmest hospitality to them, the kind of hospitality that allows them to be vulnerable with us, vulnerable in their feelings and in their thinking, vulnerable enough to make mistakes, to have the courage to not have all the answers, or to not use the best terms or words at all times. As for the intention to take care of each other, we think of it as being full of care in how you address each other and how you hear each other. Perhaps it is helpful to keep in mind the studium lectures are, above all things, pedagogical in nature. And it is sound pedagogical practice to respect each other's dignity, to believe in each other's earnestness, to nurture each other's curiosity, and to feed each other's desire to learn. Now, last but not least, we encourage you all to practice care for yourselves. Pedagogical spaces require us to practice self-care in the form of introspection, especially when we find ourselves feeling uncomfortable, maybe even in pain. I want to encourage you all to not only sit with the discomfort, but study it with open curiosity. What worldview or view of the self is endangered in this space? Or how did you come to acquire this belief? And what or who is placed at risk by this or that perspective or new insight? In summary, we ask you to be full of care for our guests, for one another, and for yourselves. And now it is time for what you have all come here for. In tonight's Studium joint lecture. I think it's the first time we're doing a joint lecture, so thank you for innovating with us, or innovating us. Giulia and Marente are offering us their reflections on how natural processes of fermentation can inspire us to rethink our social and economical relations in an ecological sense. Please welcome Giulia and Marente with open and warm hearts and minds. Don't mind me, I'm not here.
So good evening all. Thank you very much, Olav, for the introduction. It was not too long at all. So thank you very much for coming here. As you already heard, my name is Giulia Bellinetti, and this is my friend and colleague Marente van der Valk. We met at the Jan van Eyck Academy in Maastricht, where we respectively coordinated the Nature Research Department and the Food Lab. For the ones of you who are not acquainted with the Jan van Eyck Academy, it is an international postgraduate artistic residency institute, which since 2020 has committed to investigate climate change as the context where artistic and design practices, among many others, occurs. So the questions raised by this year's theme of future ecologies of Studium Generale are very much relevant and interesting for us. And we are very much excited to investigate some of these questions together with you tonight. So thank you again, to Olav, to Helena, and to the whole team of the Studium Generale for this invitation and to make all this possible. So yes, so as you know already, like we decided to start this lecture with quite of a bold move, meaning offering to an audience in Ghent in West Flanders a glass of beer made in the Netherlands. Wow, that was quite intense. But we still hope you're like enjoying it, or at least you're intrigued by this by this drink you have in your hands. And now I will give the word to Marente that perhaps can share with us a bit more about what this drink is.
Mm-hmm. So beer is maybe like a tiny bit different from the drink that you're drinking here, but basically it's a kvass. A kvass is like an Eastern European drink. It can be found in Russia, Ukraine, in lots of other countries in the area. And basically there's a drink in Russia that's called no Coke, freely translated. So that's basically what you're drinking now. So it's made, this specific one is made with a rye sourdough. So that taps back into our talk of sourdough economy. And in the olden days, drinks were fermented to make them safe to drink, where water was quite often polluted. So to make them safer, the sugars from bread in kvass, for instance, are transformed through enzymes produced by microorganisms into lactic acid. So this environment is basically too acidic for a lot of other pathogens and bacteria to stay alive in. For me, kvass stands for a few things I love about cooking. Working circular, so kvass is made from leftover bread, and you're not wasting anything by making this drink. And basically, the bread that I filtered out of this drink is going to be made into a bread pudding. So basically, that's like full circle. Collaborating with human and non-human elements in order to create next-level flavors. And the sheer magic and joy it gives to transform something as essential and basic as food into something surprising and new, and better yet, something that you can share with others. Engaging with the sense of smell and basically taste is a quicker way to your brain than us telling you something, so that's another reason why we wanted to start with a palate opener. And if you're not enjoying it, at least it might wake you up. So back to Giulia.
Yes. So as like Marente just introduced, the glass you're holding in your hands is actually an invitation to a journey into the world of fermentation. Fermentation is a very old, a very ancient practice, which has been particularly revived nowadays, especially because of the beneficial effects it has on human health. But moreover, next to this, fermentation is also like a very interesting entry point to observe the many complex and multiple interrelations we humans have with our environments, especially with its microorganic components. And moreover, next to this, it also offers very fascinating materials in order to rethink and to discuss concepts such as identity, individuality, community, and ecology. But however, tonight, we want actually to focus on another bubbling aspect of fermentation. And we want to think together with you about what it would happen, what it would mean to consider our understanding of economy through the lenses of fermentation, and which effects these might have on our possible future ecologies. So what we want to do today is not really to construct a new economic model based on fermentation, nor to offer solutions for the massive pitfalls of our common current economic model. What we want to do today with you is actually to invite you to a speculative exercise to think about how actually modern human relations constitute life on Earth. We want actually to do together an exercise to stretch our imagination in order to think about the world as it is co-created by modern humans, and a world in which labor is actually not only human. So we will do this by reflecting on alternative economic practices which exist next to the capitalist ones, and the economic practices that actually happen all the time, constantly, inside and around us. I'm referring to the ones happening within the fermentation processes. And this is actually like an invitation in order to highlight how actually the capitalist economic model, which by many rightly is considered among the causes of environmental depletion, of raising inequalities, of social conflicts, is actually not a monolithic and inescapable reality. It's actually one model among many others. And this is actually thinking in terms of economic diversity can be a way in order to escape what Vandana Shiva calls the monocultures of the minds, meaning our difficulty, our probably incapability to think reality otherwise, because we live, we act, and we think within a single and monolithic system of thought. This idea is actually like, is present also in a book by economist Kate Raworth, The Donut Economy, which is actually a book which has inspired us to we paraphrase the title for the lecture of tonight. And Kate Raworth actually asks in the introduction how it would be possible for economists worldwide to think about alternative economic models, more ethical economic models, when they are actually, they have like their economic knowledge is based on economic curricula built on the same literature, on the very same books written by economists, like capitalist economics, after the Second World War, like decades ago. And if there is any economist in the room, Kate Raworth refers to Paul Samuelson Economics, a book whose graphs are still used nowadays in most of economic curricula worldwide. So what we will do today is actually showing that by thinking economy otherwise and trying to think about other meanings that value, transaction, surplus, and labor could have beyond the capital, beyond like the meanings that the capitalist system has attributed them, and how this is actually a way in order to lay the ground to alternative to other economic modes which could potentially sustain and support future ecologies. How we will do that? We will get there by like first talking about what fermentation is and how fermentation actually interacts with our bodies and with the microorganism living in our bodies. We will also like present you like a number of historical uses of fermentation practice. And after all this, we will delve into economy. We will present you what the field, the scholarship in diverse economies is trying to do in order to debunk the primate of the capital in our economic thinking. And we will try to do this by bringing you some examples from the fermentation world, from actually like economic relations that are always happening through and around the fermentation process. So we will talk about the labor of fungi and bacteria, and we will talk about transactions happening in human and bacterial relations. We will talk about how the idea and the notions of value and surplus can be redefined if we look at how humans relate, indeed, through fermentation processes. All these will help us eventually to think fermentation as a political act, as well as a poetic act, and we will present the work of like some artistic practices that have been used, that have used fermentation in order to allow new meanings to emerge in relation to our inner and outer worlds. And eventually, towards the end of this lecture, we will also invite you again to make a little exercise or experiment in the sourdough economy.
So what is fermentation? Fermentation is a metabolic process using beneficial microbes that produce chemical changes in organic substrates through the action of enzymes. There are several biological processes at work in any given fermentation, but the ones that we look at from a flavor perspective break down large chains of molecules into their constituent parts, so that your tongue can basically pick up on them more easily as well. Once broken down into simple sugars and free amino acids through fermentation, the food becomes more easily digestible, nutritious, and delicious. So lactic acid fermentation is probably the most common form, and that everyone will know. Think of sauerkraut, sour milk, creme fraiche, cheese, sourdough bread, pickles, etc., etc. So we want to talk about the microbiome as well. So microbiome can refer to a lot of things, like, for instance, bacteria colonies living on your skin that are beneficial and that help you in your health, or the microbiome in your gut. We're basically going to specify on a bit more. The microbiome has been getting more and more attention recently, definitely if it comes to health and nutrition. Although individuals may have up to several hundred species individually, like collectively as humankind we have thousands and thousands. But that really depends where you're from, what kind of food you eat, if your diet is very diverse, or if you like bread and cheese all day long. So an increasing number of studies discuss the correlation between the lack of diversity in the microbiome with the presence of diseases such as diabetes, obesity, arthritis, and also depression. A rich and diverse microbiome influences positively our mental and physical health. That has been discovered. And we can cultivate our bacteria cultures with a healthy diet, which could also include fermented products. Fermented foods are known to be rich in probiotics. Probiotics are beneficial microorganisms that assist in maintaining a healthy gut. When your gut is healthy, it can more effectively extract nutrients from your food, and probiotics boost your immune system, since a healthy gut produces antifungal, antibiotic, antiviral, and anti-tumor substances. Next to this, there's something called prebiotics. Prebiotics, basically the food that you give your intestines, or the microbiome. And you need to think about sort of raw vegetables, or like fibers, or cooked vegetables. Like, those are the things you basically need to feed your intestines, like the microbiome in your intestines, in order to produce like a healthy gut. And basically, these bacteria are then very happy and give you in return a very low pH in your intestines, but also help with, for instance, phytic acid, a thing that is found in seeds and legumes and grains, for instance. Like, phytic acid is a substance that basically you can't really digest as a human being, so you need these bacteria in your gut to help you digest this. So basically, that also makes that you, basically fermentation also helps with mineral content. You take in more vitamins if you have like a good diversity of in your microbiome, but also if you eat diverse food, yeah. Basically, we're not built to digest, after a certain age, to digest things like dairy, and grains are very difficult to digest, also because of this phytic acid. So basically, fermentation helps break down molecule strengths, so it becomes easier to digest. And some good people to know, yes, thank you, are Sander Katz. He's written many, many books about fermentation. His most recent book is more about metaphor, fermentation as a metaphor, so more poetic perhaps. And Tim Spector, who studies the microbiome, has studies on twins, for instance, that have, you would think a very similar setup, starting with life, but then, depending on their diet, end up somewhere completely different if you look at their microbiome. And on top of that, fermentation has been an integral part of people and survival. So yeah, fermentation helps you get through the winter if you don't have fresh seasonal ingredients available. And yeah, next to this, it's also delicious. Umami is the fifth taste. I think most of you will probably be aware of this, but umami is basically your tongue saying that there's protein in your food. So if you ferment something that already has like glutamate, like already has these protein, if you ferment it, then it will basically get more and more umami. Think of fish sauce, soy sauce, miso, etc. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Marente. So now that Marente walked us through the wonders and the marvels of the world of fermentation, as well as our microbiome, let's talk about economy. So the link between economy and ecology can be quite puzzling at first sight, or maybe not. Actually, as probably maybe some of you know, like the effects of the concentration of political and economic power within a restricted number of corporations controlling the global food supply chain is quite, like, has had quite a big impact both on economic inequalities and food precarity, as well as environmental depletion. Like, this small group of corporation is actually, when we talk about like the global supply chain, we talk about like this group of corporation controlling both like seed trade, seed commerce, like fertilizer, pesticides as well, up to the food supply, how food is distributed worldwide, as well as like small retail. But moreover, like last week, an article was just published talking about how Exxon, like other sector, an oil company, made actually some breathtakingly realistic forecast about climate change already in the 70s and in the 80s, neglected them, or even worse, concealing them to public opinion. So, as we can see, ecology and especially environmental crisis, environmental depletion, and economy, and as we will discuss today, like specifically like a precise kind of economic practices, are very closely bound together. However, tonight we do not want to talk about the relation between capital and climate. What we want to talk tonight is actually about economy beyond the capital, economy beyond the market, and economy beyond the monetary model. We want to talk about diverse economies. So the field of diverse economies is like a growing field of studies which aims to debunk the idea of capitalist realism, as Mark Fisher has defined it, which means that actually like the belief that there is no alternative viable economic model to the capitalist ones. The field of diverse economies draws from indigenous knowledges, from feminist thinking and feminist activism, from specific trends of Marxist theory, as well as from environmental humanities. And its aim is really like to show and to demonstrate how like the capitalist model is just one of many diverse economic practices which coexist next to each other. And this point of the economic diversity, economic heterogeneity, is very key, especially if we want to practice what can be called cognitive justice, which must accompany social and racial justice. So just like to exemplify what cognitive justice is like the realization, is the acknowledgement that actually an understanding of the world exceeds the Western understanding of the world. And this is actually like a very important thing to realize if we want actually to embrace and to practice and to live within the pluriverse, which is basically, it's like a concept by Arturo Escobar, which which related to the existence of manifold, multiple, co-interacting universes together. So thinking about diverse economic practices, thinking about diverse conceptions of values, of surplus, of labor, of enterprise, is a way in order to practice ecologies of production, which is another term coming from a decolonial thinker, Buenaventura de Sousa Santos. So like a very important point of diverse economies is that they are not future ones. They are not new. They have been always existing next to the dominant economic model. And very often they even sustained it, whilst at the same time being neglected and being overshadowed by the dominant economic discourse, which has been led by capitalist theory, or being very much concerned with the idea of the capital. So just to give you some examples of these diverse economies, some of them might be explicitly economic, as in their nature, so as for instance barter, as for instance more recently open source models or informal loans, or like many other kind of practices, like informal gleaning, informal loans, and so on. Some others might be more social or cultural in their nature, and I'm talking, for instance, about elder care, but also libraries are sharing knowledge, oral tradition, parenting, or community gardening. And like stretching the discourse even further, there are like some other like more ecological, some other practices more ecological in their nature, which still have an economic quality, an inherent economic quality. And I'm now inviting you to think about photosynthesis, about soil nutrition, about fungal growth, breastfeeding, and many others. It's very important, actually, like diverse economies is a very broad like field of studies. There are many practices within it, and it's very important not to romanticize diverse economies. So they can be like competitive as well as mutualistic, opportunistic as well as symbiotic. So there is like really like a wide range. As you can already imagine, like the conceptual framework I'm trying to draw here relies very much and is rooted in the proximity between economy and ecology. And the common etymological root, eco, oikos in Greek, home, meaning home, is not only a linguistic attribute here. If we think now, I just want to play with the definition with what we consider like ecology. So if we think about ecology as like a field of study or as like a thinking concerned with the more than human relations enacting and sustaining life on Earth, then we can think about economy as the study or the thinking concerned with the process of negotiations, with the exchanges of energy, of matter, of meaning, happening within the context of these more than human practices of livelihood. Okay, so let's try to make this a bit more concrete now, or let's try with this like exercise of imagination. And I will now like try to walk you through the process of fermentation, trying to look at it in economic terms. So we learned from Marente that within the fermentation processes, there are a wide range of actors involved. We have bacteria, fungi, enzymes. We have the interaction between the human bodies and all these microorganisms. We have relations between humans emerging through and around the fermentation process. So what I'm gonna do now is actually trying to rethink actually about three economic notions, which are labor, transaction, and surplus through the word and through the process of fermentation, together with all these actors. So we will start with labor. In the capitalist system, so the capitalist system values labor, especially through the market and remunerated forms. This, of course, neglects many different forms of labors, as we have learned from decades of feminist thinking and feminist activism. We are now talking about care labor, reproductive labor, many kinds of artistic, like the majority probably of artistic labor, as well as non-human labor. And by non-human labor, I refer to the work done by earthly others, so non-human beings, in order to sustain life on Earth, to make life, like our common collective life, possible. So in the fermentation process, and particularly in the sourdough one, we learned again, like we heard from Marente, that bacteria and fungi breaks down chemical components, such as, for instance, gluten molecules, in smaller constituents that become more easily digestible by our body. So this is actually work that is happening constantly in the fermentation process. Moreover, we also learned, like we heard from Marente, that all these, like many of these bacteria and many of these fungi joins, like from the fermentation products that we might absorb, join our gut bacteria communities and contribute together with our gut bacteria to our physical and mental well-being. For instance, like to quote again Professor Tim Spector, he interestingly compare the work of our gut bacteria to actually chemical factories, non-capitalist chemical factories, which continuously break down nutrients in smaller chemical compounds that we can more easily absorb and on which we thrive. So let's move to transaction now. So, okay, we assume like it's clear that fermented food and drinks contribute to our health by nourishing and sustaining our microbiome. I want to recall another idea, another like concept that Marente spoke, which is the fact that our body is not designed in order to digest some of these components. And I will now refer to, for instance, like olive oil, red wine, chocolate, coffee, and many spices. I think like most of us might connect with at least one of these nutrients as something we are really craving for. However, like this food and these drinks contain some substances called polyphenols that we cannot actually digest ourselves. They are not directly aimed to us. So why do we love actually? Why do we crave for this food? Why do we crave for these drinks? And the answer is very interesting. It's actually because by absorbing polyphenols through all these delicious ingredients and this delicious food, we are actually nourishing the little bodies in our intestine. And by nourishing the little bodies in our intestine, we make sure they are happy and we make sure they are contributing through their work to our health and well-being. So I hope like you're seeing where I'm heading here now. It's basically about like looking at transactional modes that are happening within our gut ecologies. And it's about like looking at some symbiosis through the lenses of economics, or in economic terms, better. But let's now, I would like you now to zoom out and to scale up. So let's look at another scale of ecologies and of reciprocal relations or transactional relations. We look at how actually humans develop a relationship of care together with their sourdough cultures. So as some of you might know, or hopefully you will discover together with us tonight, the sourdough, in order to be developed, needs to be constantly refreshed with flour and water. So these care rituals actually create in some humans create a sense of affection towards their sourdough kits. And some humans even give a name to their sourdough cultures, and Ryan or Bradley Coopers are among our favorite ones. So this relationship of cares, these like sort of more than human, like human bacterial reciprocities, are built around multi-species temporalities and are at themselves forms of transactions or transactional modes. And now the third concept, the third economic notion and concept is the one of surplus. Surplus is quite central in economic thinking and in economic models. it is normally defined, it is generally defined as an excess in production or supply. And within the capitalist, and actually the way in which surplus is handled or collected or managed within certain economic practice is very much telling about the values informing those practices within certain communities. So in the capitalist system, normally surplus is appropriated and distributed on the market in order to generate and possibly maximize profit. What does it happen in fermentation economies or in the sourdough economy? Well, what happens there is that actually surplus is very often shared. If we look at the very same origin of human practices of fermentation, so how human used fermentation, historically speaking, as Marente said before, fermentation was actually a way of managing surplus. It was a way to manage excess or like abundant harvest of vegetables in order to be preserved and to be consumed during the winter months, the coldest one. And this was like a practice particularly common in the northern and coldest region of the planet. So, and moreover, actually, the sourdough cultures are very often passed on from generation to generation. And for instance, like one of the oldest known sourdough culture alive, it seems to date back to 1850, just to give you an idea. So we can see how actually like sourdough and sharing sourdough can become an expression of affection, of ancestral bonds, and even of social cohesion when shared within a community. So we want just to present fermentation and also the sourdough economy as actually a channel to transmit culinary and cultural values, but also to foster connection and solidarity within a community, and to show that actually value can be expressed beyond the financial and the monetary terms or notions of this concept, but it can also concern knowledge, solidarity, and care.
So talking about sharing starters, this is a bread made with a starter that I recently got from a friend. I had to travel for work, for chefing work, and forgot my own starter in the fridge. And basically I traveled through her home, and this is a starter from rye and spelt flour. And she gave it to me, or a part of it, and this one is 15 years old, so that's pretty special. It's been in her family for all that time. So that's a fun little fact there, or I think it's fun. So yeah, fermentation can be seen as a political act because we really have an imperative to reconnect to the sources of our food and reclaim our food in a sustainable way. Food is what enables us to live, and the pursuit of food connects every kind of being to their environment, and human beings in the name of progress have really severed this connection. We need to become reconnected to the sources of our food and reclaim our food as well, and for me personally that really goes hand in hand with reclaiming food preparation skills and getting more knowledgeable again about old and newer traditions and techniques. Fermentation helps with this as part of a larger connection to food, to soil, and all the life on it. All right, page turn. Like we already discussed a few times, on top of this, fermentation creates products that have a longer shelf life and thus fights wasted surplus. Fermentation is good for your health and tastes great as a bonus. Now I would like to introduce a Jan van Eyck alumni, Asli Hotapoglu. Asli is an interdisciplinary artist working with textiles and food to investigate interwoven themes of history, hunger, science, politics, ancestral knowledge, spirituality, and mental health. Time, intimacy, and deep sensory experiences play an important role in our work, and they help bring meaning and awareness in the choice of how we live our lives. Asli intends to research bacteria and yeast behavior through in-depth fermentation practices as a way of re-questioning lost ancestral knowledge, loss of value due to mass consumption, and the history of human migration through food cultures. Why we're sharing this bit about Asli? For one, I think she's amazing, but secondly, we have little sourdough parcels that we'll hand out on the way, I guess, when you leave. They're right there in the box. And this will, these sourdough parcels can be revived, so you can start baking your own bread at home. And we have so many parcels that we can give you too, possibly. And so you can share it with other people that you think might like baking. So one quote by Asli from Umbigo magazine last year. There's a certain mystical understanding, I believe, in the way we hold a subject in our hands. It's the love that we put into it that adds something to it. And love at the moment is about time, and time means money. In the bacterial world, the feeling of waiting for something to find a new life is, in my vision, very much related to poetry, a romantic idea to the ephemerality of nature. By dedicating time to it, I believe food can act as a catalyst for certain knowledge and emotions to be fermented. As thought enters the mind of food, and as thoughts enter the mind and food enters the body, it is more intimate than we think. This statement by Asli and part of her work takes inspiration from the message in Sander Katz's book, Fermentation as a Metaphor, where he also addresses fermentation as a state of excitement, of agitation. Thoughts and feelings can ferment into new ideas and processes. So in order to let all this information ferment inside of you, we wanted to hand out the parcels later on. The starts are dry. When you arrive home, you can scan a QR code, and then basically you have to fill in a few questions that Asli has prepared for you. And when you've answered these questions, she will basically send through all the information on how to make a sourdough loaf, but also connect you to a wider audience, because this project has been going on for years and has been in musea, etc. So basically, you'll be one of many who will be making her sourdough bread.
Yes, so we are like almost at the end of our talk. And so I just want to wrap it up. And so what we discussed today is actually what has happened or what is happening in your bodies after you drank the glass we gave you, and how actually fermentation is like a very interesting process and very healthy because it nourishes and sustains your microbial communities in your intestine. And we presented like the field of diverse economies and how actually focusing on economic diversity can be seen as an ethical and political approach in order to debunk the primate of the capital in economic thinking. We invited you and we did together like an exercise of imagination in order to think fermentation as an ensemble of economic processes. And we looked at the three different notions of labor, transaction, and surplus and values through the lens of fermentation. So after that, we discussed fermentation as a political act as well as a poetic act through the work of Asli, and who's actually allowing mysterious and intimate meanings to bubble up to the surface of our collective and individual consciousness. And with these sourdough kits, we are inviting you to join the sourdough economy and the spiritual community of Asli. So yes, we hope that you enjoyed this talk. We hope it's been inspiring, as well as triggering thinking and questions, and we're very happy to discuss this together with Olav and you during the Q&A about all of this. But especially we hope that you will be intrigued to explore fermentation, to explore the sourdough economy, as well as to hopefully discover all the many diverse economies surrounding you and making life on Earth possible. So thank you very much. Thank you.
I just wanted to add one thing that we hope you'll name your starter.
Yes, don't forget to give a name to the starter. Very important.
Cool.
Thanks.
Cool. Welcome over here.
Yeah.
Hard work, huh? 15 minutes, huh? It's long.
It is. I'll take it in a minute. Thanks.
I feel like from now on, I'm going to suggest to guest speakers that they can do it together, that maybe 25 minutes each is more,
feasible.
I don't know, more
Yeah.
nicer as a proposition. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm sure you need a few minutes to land, to calm down, drink something.
I mean, for me, it's really like helpful that we can do it together and you can bounce off each other. And when one is a little bit low, the other one takes over. So, yeah.
Perfectly done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to our audience for just a few minutes while you take time to settle in.
Thanks.
Hi. Hallo iedereen. Welcome. We've just had a really beautiful and really interesting lecture. When you invite people, in my job, when you invite people, you read what they do, and you know, sometimes you read their books, sometimes you see their YouTube lectures elsewhere, and so on and so on, and then you're like, okay, these are the people to invite, and then you invite them, and so now and then, the people you have invited entirely surprise you. Entirely. This is what happened when I was able to look at their presentation about last week, and I was like, whoa, this is so cool, so interesting. I would never have thought that that they would do this tonight. So I feel like we're very lucky tonight to have some pretty original thinking and speculation and presented to us here tonight. What we're going to do now in the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to have a conversation. And I am hoping I can seduce you all into participating in that conversation. I know this is a Belgian audience. Y'all do not like to talk. We've done this every lecture. We try to entice you. I mean, in the Netherlands, you're used to Maastricht. People, even before you start speaking, they already have a question. You will be interrupted during your keynote, yeah, so that's not the same here.
Not those rude people.
We really have to like entice them. And there are a few strategies I try to give people, maybe to help them to participate in a conversation. The usual setup is to be like, only if you have a question can you say something, right? How about we let go of that? You don't need to have a question, right? You can just resonate and vibe. You can just share. Perhaps. Like, I do this. Like, I will want to say something, but then I'm like, oh, no, I have to ask it as a question. Then I'm 20 minutes thinking about how do I formulate this thing I want to say into a fake question, you know? I don't know if y'all have that. I have that issue. My suggestion is to just share your thoughts, right? What we then do here on the stage, I guess, is perhaps confirm, be like, yeah, good idea, good point, or perhaps reflect on it, or not agree with you, or agree with you. I'm thinking maybe we can just leave it open-ended, that we don't have to ask questions, but we can just sort of share whatever resonated, whatever we felt, whatever we questioned, whatever we are hoping or seeking in our own work and our own thinking. We got a very generous invitation to be speculative, right? To think and sort of like try some experiments of our own, thinking experiments, and I want to extend that to you as well. Obviously, we may not have an answer for you. We may not fully understand what you have to say, but we want to hold space for you that you can share it as well, right? Because we don't just have experts here and non-experts. We're all thinking together. Another suggestion I would like to make is I know that for shy people who are shy, it can be like, okay, I'm not going to say something because I have to say something perfectly, right? Here's a little secret from a non-shy person to shy people, okay? And I think a lot of non-shy people should be honest about this as well, right? When I start talking, I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't have a paragraph fully scripted in my head, right? I start talking and I see where it ends, right? I think a lot of shy people think like, oh no, oh my God, this is such a perfectly worded comment, wow, amazing. No, it's not. We just figured it out as we went along. And I want to invite you to practice some of that. I'm going to start talking, and maybe I will have something coherent to say, or not. I never know, and I'm not particularly bothered before I start speaking. Is that something? You don't seem like a shy person. You also start talking.
I mean, we just spoke about fermentation and economy. Please, you can just like go like in free mood.
You can just bubble
Yes.
and ferment, and just start talking. Okay, how do we feel? Is that in the warm? Oh yeah, and there is Helena, the most powerful person in the room, because not only does she closes the door and let us begin, she also has the microphone. So if you want to say something, try to catch her attention, and then she will allow you to speak, as she has so generously allowed us to speak. Yeah? Is that okay? How do we feel about that? Is that something we can do? I really want to hear y'all. Okay? I know it's a big room, but we're so few of us. It's fine. Nobody will notice. It's not going live stream. It's going on live stream, actually. I was trying to lie. And the people on live stream, obviously, I have your questions right in front of me. Where's the live stream? I have the questions right in front of me, and I can just read your questions to Giulia and Marente. Again, there's no, à vos marques prégo. Anytime, you can ask, you can say, you can share, whatever. Even now. Anybody? No? Okay, maybe that's a little bit too early. Are we settled in now?
Yeah.
Are we good?
Yes.
Listen, I sent you this whole thing of anchor questions that we can do.
Yeah.
And I already want to throw them out, okay? So
Okay.
here's the thing. What I was thinking.
Prepared,
immediately. What I was thinking. I was prepared. I'm sorry, but I'm listening to your talk, and there's an itch in my mind that when I was reading your transcript, that now also kind of became a little bit more urgent about this notion of labor. We're going straight to fermentation. So, and the politics of it, the economics of it. And I was really kind of curious about how, to think through labor. And one of the things that I think kind of became more solid in my head just now listening to you was this notion of how a lot of the labor under capitalism is not only extractive but also very competitive. But also this sort of labor that we do because we just have to make money. We don't want to do this labor. We're not, it's working in factories, producing things en masse. There's no soul to it. And I'm thinking, if we're thinking of enzymes and microbiomes as laborers, I think I'm struck by the notion that they are not necessarily suffering to get money, to get paid, right? They're doing something that is regenerative of them as well, right? That the processes that they're engaging in as little fermentation laborers are probably also digestive for them. They're probably, I don't know, it's keeping them alive as well, right? In a very direct way, not in some indirect, but it's that they become stronger, better, faster, whatever, as they go along, while so much of our labor isn't like that at all. Is that, am I doing it right, this fermentation and the economics thing?
Yeah, I think it's again about how we read and through which lenses and through which conceptual framework we consider labor. Because again, if we consider labor within the capitalist neoliberal system, it's not only about money, it's also about prestige, right? You always say, oh, what do you do for life, right? As you meet a new person, or you feel like to identify people through their jobs. And so it's not only about money. I think it's much more complex. But yes, I think what we want to open up here is how labor can be redefined, right? How photosynthesis, so these ongoing organic labor and work that non-humans do is actually work and needs to be brought back into the picture when we consider the check and balances of our life, especially if we want to think about more ethical, more inclusive, more sustainable ways of living together. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's I think, I don't know, I don't know what bacteria feel, of course, what enzyme feels, nor what plant feels. But I just think that it's important to, again, as the work of these scholars in diverse economies are doing, shed lights into everything which exists around the capitalist system, the capitalist way of thinking. So it's really like the way of thinking. So in the moment when we narrow it, and it's very interesting also what these scholars are doing, they're even calling them capitalist practices. Just giving the plural is actually a political act. It's a performative act which allows to narrow down the weight of the capital, and just like rebalancing out together with all the other economic entities that are working. It's very like eye-opening.
Yeah, and I think I was struck by maybe what some of the surprise that came with reading what you're doing, what you did here tonight, and that got me very excited, was this notion of how everybody has certain expertises and the kind of expectations we have for, say, an artist or the director of an artistic postgraduate residency, for example, the kind of expectations we have for them, and finding you and reading you and thinking with you about economics and thinking about sort of like how we can break free from that, to me was really exciting, because I'm used to people kind of telling me that you have to be a PhD in economics to criticize economics, right? To want something different, to speculate on change and sort of research this. And then I see you here immediately getting into the thick of it, like we need diverse economies, we need alternatives to capitalism, or at least being inspired to seek that out. And I just wanted your thoughts on how did you end up here on thinking and working with capitalism?
Yeah, I think truly speaking, it's within my research, within my academic research eventually, I am studying Documenta 15. And you might have heard about the Lumbung model, and how actually the Lumbung model is also enacting other forms of economic models, economic practices for the art world. And how actually the Lumbung, so for the ones of you, the Lumbung is this architectural structure from Indonesia, and it's normally it's being used as a rice barn, where actually the surplus, again, of rice was shared within a community. But now it's also becoming a sort of, a conceptual model, which can be translated in many different contexts. So what Ruang Rupa and the Lumbung community ecosystem at Documenta 15 have been trying to do was really to rethink economics within the art world, beyond indeed competition and beyond individualism, but how can we share actually our resources, and what are actually our resources? They are the production budget, yes, but also solidarity, expertise, problems, questions, and much more. So these kind of thinking and observing and studying Documenta 15 kind of led me to then land into the diverse economies scholarship, which has been very much inspiring. And then, yes, it comes up. You just start thinking in these diverse, in these pluralistic terms. You start looking at reality in a different way.
I can imagine that you get our invitation. I think we sent it to both of you, and you both come together and be like, fermentation and diverse economies. That makes sense. Who got the ball started on this, of the two of you?
Michael. I mean, there's some overlap in our expertise, I guess, and our interests. And I mean, we could have had a chat about the academy that we both work for, but we thought it would be more fun to go in a different direction and talk a bit more about the overlap between us. And and fermentation is something that we're both interested in as sort of practical pursuit, but then, I mean, it is a really good example of what Giulia just described.
But so, one of the things that when we were researching, doing this program, that we kept coming across over and over in terms of sort of ecology, the future of the climate, and how are we gonna mitigate this, compensate for that? How are we gonna, like, you know, build a different kind of global society that is not, you know, destroying everything around it? Oftentimes, we would, you know, find people who are working with food and thinking about food, and, you know, whether it is the production of food or whether it's the cooking of food, and, you know, and I thought, you know, like, I'm kind of wondering whether this is this sort of food and ecologies and the future and mitigation and compensation, restoration, all these things are things that interest you, and whether there's any specific or particular type of things that are happening in food science that you think is really exciting.
I mean, yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, ecology and the environment, it's food is like a really big influencer on how we approach the environment and how well we're doing with sustainability. So how you make your choices, if you get your vegetables locally, if you know the producers that you get your vegetables from, if you buy organically, which, I mean, for your gut microbiome makes a really, really large difference. If you buy organically, you actually have vegetables that are grown in like soil that's alive. So herbicides are often antibiotics, so they kill a lot of the beneficial bacteria next to the things that are aimed for. So basically, you want vegetables that are full of bacteria and maybe some pathogens that you're not so happy with, but yeah, eat raw vegetables, or eat, like, never wash them with hot water, but you can have them cooked as well. But yeah, this is very important for your gut health. But then, yeah, food miles, how much meat you eat, etc., etc. This has a really large impact on the climate change and on the environment. Yeah. So these are definitely topics that I work with a lot, practically as well as theoretically. And next to that, like the microbiome, it's a very new topic. I guess there's a few people that are knowledgeable that are sharing knowledge on Instagram, etc. And there's a lot of books about it now, but it's still really, really new. But if you read about, like, for instance, your appendix, they always thought that it doesn't have a function, so you can just cut it out.
That's not true?
They think it's a library where you store bacteria that are not used. So once you start eating, these are recent findings, once you start eating the vegetables or whatever that particular bacteria is looking for, you basically revitalize. Until then, it sits still.
Oh, we have already a question. Hi. Talk to us. Or not a question, we don't know. Just share with us.
Hi. I'm not sure if it's a question. Well, I'll find out during.
It doesn't have, you know. Let's see where it takes us.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for holding space and for opening up. I think you did that in a very careful way. So thank you for that. It was very nice to be received, basically. And thank you, Marente and Giulia, for the talk. I don't know much about fermentation, but what I feel in it is that it's a process, and that if I make it a bit broader, that everything in life is a process, and there is nothing is permanent. There's only impermanence, and I see that in the story that you're telling, that you're using that as something beautiful to have more variety and maybe also more healthy way of living and working with resources. And I think that's very beautiful to embrace life as a process, because I think it is a process, and I think in the more black and white society, we don't like to look at things that are imperfect or impermanent, and I hope this helps us to embrace that we will all vanish at some point, and something new will come back for it, and it goes forward, and whatever it goes to, we don't know yet, or we'll never know. But thank you for that. And yeah, I also would like to, in some other moment, go a bit deeper into the relations between, or the parallels between economy and fermentation, because I also see quite some differences. But some things went a bit fast in the presentation for me to process cognitively. But yeah, it's the door is open, I would say.
Thank you. See, I like this, vibing, resonating. Because I also was thinking a lot when I was reading your transcript about this, these relationships of these cooperative and mutualistic relationships between us and these fermentation agents. Because you said at some point that they ferment stuff and certain things that we cannot otherwise digest. But it's not just us. There's all kinds of other living bodies that benefit, right, from this fermentation. I know that there are certain primates who are known to basically drink or eat fermented fruit. And they get a little bit drunk, but it's also good for them. So there's, around the natural world, there is this whole, this fermentation process has benefited other living bodies that need to digest certain things, which kind of says something about the ways that we're actually really imperfect, right? The ways in which, things like bacteria make us, sort of enable us to exist. And this ties in for me with some of the things I've been reading this last year about the ways in which life kind of affects the environment, affects Earth. Like a lot of the things, things like oxygen, things like, there's a lot of things happening around us that are the byproduct of life living. Not necessarily some of life creates the conditions it needs to live, right? Including gut bacteria. They basically enable us to be moving around and feeding them. So they make the conditions in our guts that make them able to live, and vice versa. I think it's really that imperfection, that sort of openness that we have, because we cannot survive without so much of each other. Yeah, I totally vibe with that. Sorry, did you?
Yeah, we kind of know him. He's from the Netherlands.
Oh, he's from the Netherlands, yeah. That's why he said something.
No, I'm joking. No, but actually, the point of, I would be very curious, to delve more into, of course, it's a speculative exercise, so it's not that fermentation is a perfect and complete and closed economic system, but it's just where actually this comparison and this exercise would lead us in order to rethink economy. So that's actually kind of more an imaginative exercise. It's not like we didn't want to construct a model, although it would be very interesting to do that. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely you're talking about imperfection, but it's more perhaps the openness and indeed this processual nature of life on Earth, right? How we are constantly co-defined and co-determined by our byproduct, which could be our surplus, right? The surplus of our action, of our breathing. But yeah, how it's basically a way to decentralize the human also when we think. When we really think. So the fact that we actually like coffee, not because we like it, but because someone else inside ourselves like coffees and the polyphenols inside coffee. It's actually quite an interesting thought, right? In order to, again, redefine check and balances when we think about ecology and life on Earth.
Hi, yeah.
Okay, is everybody Dutch here tonight?
I'm Belgium. But I studied my master's in the Netherlands at the Wageningen University. I actually studied molecular nutrition and toxicology, so I learned about the microbiome in my studies. But I like that thank you both for your talk tonight. I like that you not only stick to the scientific part of fermentation, but you actually touch so many different possible topics tonight. And that's something that I don't really have a question, but I just want to vent a bit, if that's okay. So I've done these studies, and I've been in the academics and in the lab, and now I work in a restaurant, and I'm actually fermenting for my job there. So I totally resonate with all the topics you said tonight. And so I felt the need for going out of the box of only the molecules and only the cells to, the essential part, which is food, in my opinion. But I feel like I'm still on this journey, and that I feel also the need to, and it's also a topic that you touched, like we create this relationship with the stuff we ferment and with the process and the ritual and the microbes. And that's also now, I think for me, still like this exploration that I feel it becomes something that's almost like artistic. But it's hard to, as people, like if you say, I studied this, people say, why don't you do anything with your study? So like we said, when you have a certain expectation of something you read from people, you see this or that. So that, how to say this? That I still make this exploration more to, now I feel in my life that I want to give fermentation as an art form more shape, but it's something that's really difficult for time and money, of course, but also because of, I think, perception of people that something should be, like you have science and you work with food, but you're a chef, or you're just like the person who does the dishes, or you're an artist. And so I really like that you combine those things here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe Marente, you want to say something? Because you might, like we were discussing many times about similar questions or similar.
I mean, not strictly working within what I study, which is product design engineering. I often get that question myself, like, why are you not doing anything with design? Or, it's basically, I never envisioned myself ending up where I am now, working in a food lab, like working more sort of on the artistic side of food. And it is still a path that is, I mean, new. So it is sort of finding your own way and what works for you. And what doesn't work for you, that builds that road, I guess. The monetary value of your work, that is a really difficult question. For instance, Asli really does like a lot of fermentation for restaurants, for like museums, but also teaches. I mean, she does a lot of different things to make it work financially as an artist, but also as a, chef, fermenting quite a lot. Another option is working in a restaurant. And if you have a job just fermenting, I think then you're quite lucky. But I think a lot of people just work as chefs, I guess, and then part of that is fermenting.
And again, if we use like the metaphor of fermentation, like to look also about our, our pathway, our life, and how, how our professional identity has developed or is developing, it's perhaps like something, some aspects that might have been perhaps like in this moment are kind of like silent or dormant in your life. Some studies you might have done, perhaps they are just like fermenting and they will just bubble up again, like in a certain moment. I study I have like an economic background myself, and then for many years I kind of forgot it. So I guess this is like one of these bubbling effect of like some previous knowledge.
You're scaring me. I studied corporate law. I don't want it to come back. I want it to stay where it is.
Know the enemy is very
know
important.
the enemy. Yeah. No, but I do think it's really interesting about, because you said something about reconnecting, that you were inspired, that it resonated with you, what Marente was telling us about not just the biology and the science of fermentation, but also the different ways in which, for example, communities are created around fermentation practices, whether it is through passing on starters over generations. Also, for example, kimchi, sort of like how I see a lot of, like people with Asian descent or Korean descent talk about cooks, whether it's on TikTok or on social media, talk about how these foods and are connected to particular cultural ties and histories, and just sort of share them with the world in ways that I think are very beautiful and inspiring and impactful. I mean, I don't know, like I find that there are two communities, fermentation and composting communities, that are three communities: the mycelial communities of amateur professionals and who do amazing things and who are very rich in their creativity and in their sort of the way that they create new knowledge and so on. So I'm pretty sure you have a lot of these people in your food lab. What are they up to? What are they doing?
We host, as an academy, we have 45-ish participants, we call them, so postgraduate artists, researchers, designers, all sorts. You have two interns and two fellowship people doing fellowships. So every year we have 1 or 2 or 3, and sometimes last year we had the Traveling for our Museum of Forgotten Skills, so that's 7 people as one group, as one collective, and on top of that we had 2 others. So that's 9 people as part of the food lab, but it's massive, but this year we have 2. One is more of a filmmaker that focuses on food as her main topic, and the other one really works with food practically, and is going to take over our cafe where we serve like daily lunches, and is going to sort of make it his own over the next few months. So in 2020-21 we had Asli, but we also had Soft Projects Digest, who do a lot of research, but then that research always ends up being edible, and being shared. But sometimes, people work with food in ways that don't end up on your plate, and I mean that's all part of the story. It's about sharing knowledge and sharing. If it's edible in the end, everyone enjoys it, and that's the beautiful thing about food, where everyone has a connection with food because everyone needs to eat. So what other topics are we working on? You and I.
Well, of course, food is also a way of exploring migratory processes, colonialism. So there are also all these political undertones behind food, and it's really also a way in which we embody knowledge and we transmit knowledge. So there is really, and how we relate to food, to soil and to our ecologies through food. So we have also a composting system in the academy. So there are all these reciprocities, right? And we compost, and then we nourish. We have a garden. It's a vegetable garden. It was also an artistic project, and so sometimes we supply our kitchen from that garden. So yes, there are many different connections and explorations around.
Reciprocities. That's the word. Isn't that a better, wouldn't that be better than transaction? To think through fermentation through diverse economies through a fermentation lens. Wouldn't reciprocities be a much more
absolutely.
than transactions?
Absolutely, no, totally. Reciprocity is a very generative terms. I think perhaps transaction is more neutral.
Okay.
Reciprocity has this positive like meaning or like significance behind it, right? I mean, reciprocity, as we were talking before about like the reciprocities between sourdough cultures and humans, it's a form of transaction. I give you something, I receive something back, and there's like a care, a care being exchanged there.
Yeah.
But yes, absolutely. But we wanted actually to stress on like the economic. But it's true.
Yeah.
It's also like reciprocities and cares are also concepts that are recurring quite often when we talk about ecology. So I think perhaps our aim was also like to perhaps move one step away from certain like recurring concepts in order like to put some other like material on the table to discuss about.
Yeah. But yeah, okay, so sorry. I was distracted. I heard reciprocities. I was like, that's the word I was looking for.
But
back to you. So I once read that one of the indicators of empire that is at its late stages is the rise of celebrity chefs. Apparently, at the very late stages of the Roman Empire, for example, there were some really celebrity chefs. It's a theory I read somewhere once. Apparently, in the Chinese Empire as well, there's a few like indications that if you start having these big shot celebrity chefs, like. And obviously, the Western global hegemony and dominance is empire, and I'm kind of wondering whether sort of this culture of food of certain, I don't know, would you call it like food art? Would you call it, or is it sort of exclusive food experiences designed by renowned chefs and, who are doing technologically incredibly complex things, but using extremely rare ingredients that, create experiences that are really only for the most, for the most exclusive of clientele. Is that the kind of experiences we're talking about that in a real way can create a change in the way we sort of relate to one another, in the way that we connect to these histories of I don't know if any of you saw the movie The Menu.
Not yet.
Oh, you should, but anyways, but I'm just really interested in this notion of like food, this very high level experiences, food experiences, highly developed and exclusive and curated by celebrity chefs. What does that, how do we situate that in our current civilization, I guess?
I mean, if you consider art in this discourse, it is really problematic because I think it's problematic because a lot of the times it is only those people that are sort of requesting, artistic dinners or can afford, and otherwise it's subsidized. So, or you're doing it out of the love of your heart, or the love for the subject, or the passion that you have for it as an artist, which most often happens as well. I guess real change doesn't happen on that level that has all the money. Real change happens in the lower levels where you do need to inspire people to step out of their comfort zone and to see things differently and make different choices perhaps. And I think that is the true power of working as an artist, or inviting people to look at it from a different angle, or inviting them to taste something different. Or at the Food Lab, for instance, the cafe that I just mentioned, we just serve vegetarian and vegan food. And initially people were like, my God, I really miss meat. And then you sort of show them what you can do with vegetables, and if you carefully prepare things, that you don't miss meat at all. So it is sort of a soft hand, inspiring people to make different choices. But I mean, yeah. I don't think you. I don't like that layer that you just described at all, and I don't think they are going to bring the change.
Because I think art, the reason why I'm asking is because I think art, whether it's food art or other type of art, has always had a very contentious and complex relationship with capital, right?
Yes.
And, you know, like I working at a school of art and being involved in the cultural sector, in the art sector, you see that relationship in its complex forms, and I'm just trying to think of like ways in which we, you know, these diverse economies, maybe unentangle ourselves from that complex relationship. And I think it's important in your work as well, in your research, right? Figuring this out.
Yeah, I think like in all our works and in all our practices, it's very important. And yeah, bringing up like celebrity chefs as like celebrity artists, right? Like it's like the resonances are very strong. And actually, like indeed, like this awkward and complex relation with capitalism, but I would say also the last stage of neoliberalism, right? How it has actually influenced this specific culture, which eventually becomes the louder, like the more visible ones. But again, there are like so many other things. There is so much dark matter there, which are all the other artists, all the other food practitioners that are not visible because they are not like under the spotlight. So I think it's very important that also I think like there is a growing attention to like also having these collective forms as a way to move away from the individuality of like the artist, of the celebrity figure, in order to make understand that actually processes and also celebrities co-created, right? Like there are always people supporting like the person being there. Behind the celebrity chef, there is a very knowledgeable and very experienced team behind. So I think also like some food art practices or some artistic practices are very interesting and very strong and powerful in the way they empower people. They involve people within the process of creation of whatever it is, and in this way they make people feel that they can take they can claim more space, more power into their life. And I mean, it would be very interesting to consider like our grandparents or grandparents as the celebrity chefs of our life, right? So this is also why actually like moving away from food as something of a high culture. Actually food is something that is very common among all of us, right? Is actually like probably the first moment of sharing we would have, and the first like the most immediate act of care that we could have for someone, for a stranger or for someone part of our family. So it's actually very much common and very much hands-on and part of our lives.
Very life-sustaining. I hear that there is somebody else.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. So first, I'd like to thank you for your lecture. It resonated with me that things like slowing down, less excesses, more a healthy look at a whole process. But I had a question, and I'm a little bit shy to ask you, because it's about a level that you have to explain me like I'm 5-year-old, because it's not my business. I'm not in economy. Making kombucha is the biggest achievement I think I had in this field. But I was thinking tomorrow people are going to ask me from, okay, where was the lecture about? And I have a concept that you have to say it like in 3 sentences, and I'm struggling with that. So I'm still at the concept of economy. It's very interesting that you refer to education, parenting, like that concept. It was a new thing for me. But I was thinking a sourdough economy. Okay, what did I hear? It also was a little fast sometimes for my my mind, and I was wondering if can you maybe explain it like it's an open source circular economy? Is it something like that you mean in the sourdough? And my second question is, how do you see it next to capitalism? Because you explained that it's already here somewhere. There are different economies. So I think I want to grasp it a little more. Yeah.
Yes,
That's
thank you.
my question for now.
Thank you for your questions. This is why it's important that shy people speak.
Exactly, because they got good questions.
Very good questions. So the first question was about, like, not to explain the lecture in 3 sentences, right? That was like, okay. So like how I see the sourdough economy. Like an open source model, probably yes. Yeah. Probably yes. It's really like, as I said, we haven't yet reached the stage of developing an economic model. So I don't have like a definition for it, but it's definitely open source because like there are like also bacteria that are continuously evolving. So we have like continuous new inputs and outputs, or, you know, like new contribution into this economic model. And circular, I mean, if we look at circularity like in an ecological sense, we know that nothing is created and nothing gets lost, right? Mm. Like everything is interconnected. There are all these cycles of beneficial and non-beneficial reciprocities, so it's definitely also circular. So it's a bit really like, that's why we call it like an exercise to stretch our imagination. It's really like to provoke thinking. And like it's, first of all, also to bring up, like, to bring to the forefront, really like to look at the non-humans as important and essential part of our lives. As I said before, like labor and work is remunerated, so we don't see everything which is not remunerated as something important that make our life rich, possible, and exciting. So actually all these little actions, all these little dynamics, all these little interaction that normally are neglected because they are too small or too slow, like the idea of like slowing down is also very important, too slow to be noticed because our lives are always so fast. Or we are like overwhelmed by all these very bright images, all these very catchy words, all these, you know, like all these like exceptional storytelling. But there is like so much interesting in the mundane, in the small, like in the microorganic. And this is also like the relation between sourdough economy and the capitalist system. I mean, this is really like bringing it a bit like to the next step. But as we said before, like diverse economies, photosynthesis, the sourdough, like all this microbial work happening in our intestines, are supporting capitalist economies. Like when farmers work their land, they need actually, they don't, like at a very essential level, they need the food in order to get the energy in order to work the soil. They don't really need like the GDP. So there are like some layers that eventually enables the monetary economy to happen. And, you know, like just realizing that there are all these economic processes, like our digestion, our health, our like physical well-being, and, you know, like also ingesting healthy food that comes from healthy soils, that is important in order to, not in order to, but it's sustaining actually what is eventually like the extractivist economy of neoliberalism and capitalism.
And I think what my takeaway is, when I was reading and I got really excited, I was like, oh, this is so awesome. They came up with something new for us, for today, you know, super fun. What my takeaway is, you know, sort of, I've been thinking a lot and reading a lot about this notion of capitalist realism, this notion that we kind of have come to believe, have come to be convinced that capitalism is sort of the default state of things, that is kind of like, we think of alternatives to capitalism as if capitalism is sort of like the norm, what people do, what societies do, regardless, right? And that's not true at all. In fact, capitalism is not an inevitability of any sort. In fact, a lot of the notions that we have about capitalism and the people who have, theorized and practice it and manage it and so on are based on really faulty observations and analysis of the natural world, right? So this social Darwinism, for example, that we have come to think of as true, this notion of competition everywhere, and this notion of like greed and survival of the fittest, these really vague notions that we see both in political theorizing and economic theorizing are like deeply misunderstood and deeply misinterpreted and misapplied, actually. And so this natural world has been like a place where humans and scientists and academicians and theoreticians have not only misunderstood things and applied them in human society, but also projected all kinds of things that are also not true. For example, the study of trees and forests has been led on an erroneous path for decades on this notion that trees are in competition with each other. And we have people like Suzanne Simard, who then, after painstaking research, finds out that these trees are actually cooperating and really helping each other. Trees that are not the same species even are like collaborating. And she then introduces this notion of like, wait, trees are not competing. Actually, they are supporting one another. And it's like, boom, like what? But it's obviously our obsessions with competition and greed that made decades of academicians and scientists before her refuse to see it in any other way, right? And I find it really inspiring to see two people come and be like, we found something else to observe and learn from and sort of develop new, I guess, economic models through, because I think we should do that more often. We should decenter that, and we should sort of hold these really important academics and theoreticians that tell us that capitalism is the only real thing that can ever happen. We should hold them a little bit in disregard. And if you love fermentation, let it be the source of inspiration. And if you love something else, let that be your inspiration for perhaps thinking of different ways of doing economy or politics or whatever. That's what was my takeaway listening to, and I got really excited. That I hope that it's like other people go like, oh yeah, let me also speculate on how we could do working, surplus, value, how we could do that differently. Anyways.
And I might just add one thing. It's also like some of these practices are existing. So like when I was quoted the Lumbung, but there are like the Bouenvivier from South America, like the Maya from Southern Africa. There are like many like economic practices, like alternative economic models, which are not like theoretical economic models, but they are like practices, like really enacted on the ground.
And have been going on for centuries sometimes.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, hello. First of all, thank you very much for the explanation we got. It was actually right. I was thinking, like, Rome isn't built on a day, right? But I was thinking quite a few times during your explanation, like, oh yeah, there might be another possibility. I'm not saying this will be the savior of the world, but it's inquiring me to think outside. Like, yeah, capitalism. There were other sources, and that made me think of a place we went to this summer. The place is called Domazan-sur-Arise. It's a little town in the south of France. And when we came over there, actually it was a little commune. So I'm not talking 60 hippies with, we're doing this, but I'm a little bit.
a little bit.
But it was fun. But the people were more were alternative, living, self-sustaining, and they were working together with this big chateau there was a hotel. And every Tuesday, every Thursday, local markets. And they told us to go to La Tomate du Jardin. It's a small restaurant. It's very hard to get in, not because of the Otan people, not a lot of money. It was like 16 euro for a lunch, but they decide your lunch. And at the moment we sat down, we had the feeling like, okay, there's something like different. And the main difference was that these people were really enjoying what they were doing, open kitchen, working with seasonal products. And they gave us this card where it was put on, I don't know how to say it in English, it's called korte keten. It means they buy from short circle. And they made not contract, yeah, I think contracts with local farmers, local wine farmers. They made nature wine, not bio wine, or just really and it was really crazy to see. So I actually think these economics are closer by than we believe. We are just kind of shut-eyed to it because of television media telling you this, you need this, you want this. Yeah, so that was my my thought of this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
I think, like, Marente, we have also something to say about Maastricht and farming communities. But thanks a lot for sharing your experience. I would be super happy to get the name of this place for, future, journeys.
Yeah, well, as an academy, you mean, or...
Yeah, I mean, our relation with VIM and, supporting farming practices.
I mean, yeah, we work together with Wim. Wim is actually a Belgian farmer who lives just across the border. And he brings vegetables for the kitchen to use, but also we have a WhatsApp group so people can order straight from Wim. So you cut out, the supermarket, yeah, that's a short chain, and that really helped Wim for one, because he works alone quite a lot. So he comes on Wednesdays. On Wednesday evenings, we have the participants' dinner, which is open to an audience, to the public. So he joins in for dinner, gets to chat to all the participants that are there that year, and they get to know, in reverse, they get to know the person that actually puts food on their plate. We work together with Reinier, another Dutch farmer, but also in Belgium. Wim mainly focuses on being organic, where Reinier focuses much more on flavor. So he grows for the flavor experience, and this goes hand in hand with growing organic mostly, but also growing in soil that is alive. So by working together with all these people, you're basically, you're bringing the story much closer than just buying something in a supermarket. And I think that's really valuable and also a big source of inspiration for a lot of people.
Yeah, and shortening the distance between consumers, so who buys the food or the ingredients, and who produce them, who works on the land, makes you also understand much better the struggles and why things are different, and why you appreciate so much more what you're eventually having in your hand. And there are many really many formats in which it's possible to support farming communities. I know there are, for instance, certain contracts or models in which you're basically paying a subscription. It's not a formal subscription, but you're paying a fixed amount per month to a farmer, and then you receive a certain amount of vegetables or fruit or products. And in this way, you're also supporting the farmer when perhaps there are some climate negative effects on the harvest, or when the harvest is being damaged. So it's also a way of supporting these practices that are very much fragile, especially in times of climate change. And I also want just to mention, I was recently reading about like radical alternative economies that have been emerging in Greece immediately after the austerity measures decided by the Troika. So basically the Troika has imposed certain measures which have brought to a neoliberalization of many public services like education, schools and healthcare in Greece. And as a reaction to this, a lot of informal networks have started like creating food banks or informal education activities or initiatives. So there are like all these alternative, you know, alternative is also like, it's kind of like connected to a certain like meaning, but these diverse economies do exist. And it's probably what they require us is like to slow down to notice them because they're not so evident or not so loud.
Yeah, they're not so loud, not so violent either, perhaps.
Hello, everybody.
You people are like my favorite audience of this whole year, okay? I'm gonna take down all your numbers and you have to come to every single one from now on, okay? I see
Start a
you.
WhatsApp group. I have, it's a bit threefolded, the Trinity. Just first a little footnote, because you said in your lists, there's the people who compost, there's the mycologists, the fermenting people, but we always forget about the lichenologists that are very, 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 very important as an organism, I think. So that's a footnote. And yeah, I wanted to like speculate a bit, or like it's more like a question, if we could speculate a bit further about the model of the sourdough economy. And I'm thinking also like in fermenting, I feel like there's also different, yeah, of course, many different traditions, but we were talking about this, one of the gurus, like Sandor Kraut, who wrote all these books about fermentation as a metaphor. And I think he kind of introduced this thing of like wild fermentation as opposed to like fermenting in a sterile environment. And I feel that's kind of like two different schools of like, no, you have to sterilize your jars before you, and he was like, no, like that's very contradictory. So I wonder within the sourdough economy, if you also were thinking about this distinction, this bifurcation between like sterile and non-sterile, and what would be a wild economy then, for example?
Good question.
Wild sourdough.
And yeah, and then I was also thinking about the educational aspect of it, and I work in Brussels for a place called Art Basics for Children, and we're currently preparing a series for teenagers that has the title The Alchemy of Cooking and Fermentation. And I was writing a little text today for the website, and like was really trying to think about, okay, how can we like entice teenagers into the process of fermentation? And I was wondering also thinking about teenagers and economy, because I feel if we talk about economical models, we oftentimes forget the wild ethics and the wild mind of the child. And I feel like a lot of like societal problems and political issues, if we would present them and propose them to the mind of a child, they oftentimes have much more interesting ideas and solutions to problems. So that's another thing I wanted to throw into the room, if you have ideas about it. 'Cause, yeah.
There's also another question, right? Can we add that one and then we can clôturer together?
Yes.
Yeah? But do you remember what was the wild sourdough economy? What would that be?
And the children.
And the children, yeah.
Children creativity. We won't actually like, can we just discuss it between the two of us to answer your question? Yeah. No, I'm joking.
Yes. Hi everyone. Thank you for the very, very inspiring lecture. I enjoyed a lot. I have a proposition of an idea which is related to debt, so the concept and the idea of debt. I think the capitalist way of seeing things it has to be always in a constant growth. So capital, ideally GDP, should always continue growing. But in contrast, in nature, we see that that is actually part of life, and that is essential to sustain life. I was reading this book, The Overstory, by Richard Powers, in which there's a sentence that says, "There's more life in a dead log than in a standing tree." And I found that was a very impactful sentence and a very interesting and beautiful way of seeing life and death. Also, because I come from Mexico, in Mexico we have this Day of the Dead celebration, in which we every year we bring food to a place, and we remember the people who were with us and who departed a long time ago. So just to come back again to the topic of fermentation, I think, as one of my fellow speakers said before, we might want to embrace the imperfection and this continuum of life and death. And hopefully I can bring a good message, which is that is a good thing. And for the capitalist system, as in every other system, human-made, it will come a point where it will be dead. And hopefully we can restore it with bubbling and well-fermented new system.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, these are the last ones are always the best, huh?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
So
wild
fermentation
sourdough
and sterile fermentation.
Well, in a practical sense,
Which of the two currents are you in, Marente?
I mean, it really depends on what you're doing. I think as undercuts would also, I mean, if you're doing lactic acid fermentation, that will give you a lot of space to work a bit more freely and not be very strict. But as soon as you start working with meat or, I mean, fish, you need to be a bit more careful not to have the wrong pathogens. So in that sense, I mean, it is all about, I guess, a bit of intuition and also a bit of leeway both ways. But that, in aspect to the economy.
In economic terms, thank you for the suggestion. We will think about it and let you know. Follow-up lecture to this, Olav.
But I am very interested in this one.
In this, sterile.
This notion of wildness in economy. Like last year, 2 years ago, we had somebody come and talk to us about economics. These are students of economics here in UZ Gent. Like many other groups of students around the world who are studying economics, who are really resisting against the ways in which economic science, kind of using mathematical models, creates sterile sort of thought experiments that they then release upon the world and refuse to take into account the messiness, the wildness of life itself. Right? So a lot of the things that we hear economists and politicians say about economics as truth are things that have been developed in nearly sterile mathematical conditions that do not take into account life, the real life actual events. So when we hear about inflation does this, when that happens, and we think, oh, this is a knowledgeable person, these notions are devoid from reality, right? And I would honestly, I think that that concerns me that we have this whole class of scientists that systematically, structurally ignore real life and then basically decide our lives, right? And if we're gonna have sourdough economics, then it should definitely be wild. It should definitely be paying attention to what is actually happening as opposed to what economics and economic scientists do. They completely ignore what's actually happening. Everything you hear about price, about money, about inflation, they do this using even the whole pandemic, the measures that they came up with, all of that was by literally using mathematical models that discount and take out reality. That can't be.
Yeah.
That can't be the alternative.
Yeah.
That can't be the diverse economies.
Yeah.
So wildness, yes, non-sterile conditions. I'm all for that. But anyway, it's gone.
Yeah, they left out the limits of the planet, right? The planetary limits, which have not been considered like in these economic models. They reduced like the human and the individual to a rational, maximizing machine almost. It's all like very mechanistic as well, you know, it's like a cause-effect chain of event. So yeah, in this sense, but at the same time, like, I think it maybe it's more complex than this, because when you were talking about wilderness, I've been thinking about, perhaps also because of my reading, to wild capitalism and the wild market. So something left completely unrefrained and unconstrained, which is like growing without any control and without any consideration of like other, which is a bit different, because the lab and the sterilization of different, like the jars, etc., is more like a form of control. So it's actually like it's a very interesting like material to work with.
I think this notion of free market capitalism is just branding, because there's very little that is unregulated in what they do. Like the notion that you know, when you look at, for example, the kind of laws that have been, you know, in the last decades or so in the United States, antitrust laws that have been basically rendered, you know, unworkable and ineffective, are laws that were trying to prevent monopolies. And monopolies do what? That's not free market capitalism. That is extremely regulated market capitalism, but from the corporate side of things, right? But anyways, that's different. But yeah, I see what you're, I see what you're, Anyways, the death. We cannot leave without having talked about death.
I mean, we have a question in the middle, right?
Yeah, children. Education.
Thinking.
I mean, Asli lives in Brussels. Perhaps it's interesting to invite her sometimes to work with you on that topic.
Yeah, and probably like children thinking is very much similar, or it can be even more imaginative than what we were, right? Like in order to, you know, mix together different disciplines and different attributes and different terms is like redefining what the disciplines can be, while, yeah, we have been grown up into certain disciplinary fields, so it's more uncomfortable for us to switch and to move.
But you did so well today. You brought together your fields of expertise and made something really fun. I like it. Sourdough economy. Death, growth, fermentation, nature, the end of capitalism, the death of capitalism. Thoughts, feelings, hopes?
Hopes. No, thank you very much for bringing this up, because it's a very important topic. And again, it's important, like, I'm always trying not to romanticize too much things. So, I mean, we are like moving out from a very difficult and bleak period, right, in which we were like the pandemic. But it's true that actually, like, neoliberalism, so the latest stage of capitalism, has brought us to neglect death, neglect disease, neglect our physical, like being physically unwell or mentally unwell. And I think it's important that perhaps we reconnect also with the less positive side of our mental and physical being, and like not embrace them as a form of renounce, but just like trying to understand what is happening and not finding immediately a solution which help us to, you know, keep on running as we have been doing, and keep on smiling and keep on pretending to be well and to be fine. But perhaps like sometimes even just admitting that, you know, if we take like a broader or a larger understanding or concept of death, and we put in it also like feeling down, like depression, or, you know, like other like negative feelings or negative states that might affect us, talking about them and embracing them, and, you know, like really like engaging with them and dealing with them could be like a way of processing. And this is like how death is actually like, how death acts in the natural world, right? It's like this process of change and transformation in order to give new life. So rather than suppressing our even, yeah, like when we're dealing with like a person that we might miss or that we might have lost, like just dealing with this feeling might actually lead us to discover other aspects of our well-being, of our reality, inner reality or not. So I think like engaging with death in all its different manifestations and meanings is very important.
Y'all are so much fun. Thank you so much for this evening. And also, thank you all. I feel like there's a new year, new Belgium. We're all going to talk from now on. I am very grateful for your contributions, for your questions, your resonances, and your insights. Yeah, and for this really beautiful moment you all helped create. Thank you so much. Get home safe and come back on the 14th of February. We will have 2 people from a pretty anarchist commune in France coming to tell us about not very hippie, but very anarchist, rebellious commune in France, Le ZAD, and they will tell us about, what's the title? Art for Life? Yes. I think y'all should be here as well. It's going to be really fun. Thank you. Have a good night.